Welcome to this month's Fit for Colorado Talk to the Doc Chat. I'm CBS 4 anchor and health reporter Kathy Walsh. For the next half hour, we'll be chatting about health issues here on CBS4Denver.com. Throughout this chat, we encourage you to ask questions by simply typing them in the chat window at right, and we will do our best to answer those questions. In today's chat, we're going to discuss foot health. Don't take your feet for granted. Guess what? 3 out of 4 Americans will experience serious foot problems in their lifetime. The foot contains 26 bones, 33 joints, 107 ligaments, and 19 muscles. When the bones in the foot are out of alignment, so is the rest of the body. Joining me today is Dr. J. Cade Christensen, podiatrist at Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center. All right. When do people start experiencing foot problems? We know a lot of people get them. When does it really start up?
It can vary. A lot of people, it depends on the type of problem. We've seen there's certain problems that are manifest more in children, and then there's other things that are kind of a wear and tear that tend to affect people later on in life. But foot problems can start early.
Yeah.
They really can.
You have to be conscious of that. I don't think people think about kids and foot problems. When should you take your kid to a podiatrist?
Well, your kid's normally going to tell you. If they're young and they can't, you need to watch their walking patterns. There's certain things that, the way they walk, if they complain they want to be carried all the time when other kids their age, are walking or are more active, that's some of the first signs that a parent may see. And then obviously as they're older and they can tell you, hey, something's not quite right, or they're complaining or rubbing their feet, then it's worth having it looked at.
When people complain, we hear about a lot of things a lot of the time. Let's go over a couple of those. The one I hear a lot is bunions. Let's take a look first of all. I know we have sort of a graphic where you can explain what is a bunion.
So what a bunion is, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there about actually what a bunion is, but a bunion is actually a joint that's not lined up well. So it's the first metatarsal phalangeal joint, and what happens is, over time, there's a musculoskeletal or tendon imbalance that causes the big toe to kind of drift towards the smaller toes, and then people will notice a large bump on the inside of their foot. Bunion in Latin actually means turnip. So what happened is people would wear shoes and they look down and they see a big red, a bump on their foot. And so
you got a turnip. Oh no, it's a bunion.
It's a bunion. Mm-hmm. So exactly. So it's actually a joint that's not lined up. People kind of confuse them with warts or corns or calluses, but a bunion is actually a joint that's not lined up correctly.
It can be pretty painful, can't it?
It can initially, and over time, it's kind of like tires on your car. If the joints in your feet aren't lined up correctly, they wear differently. So oftentimes a malaligned joint will, cause arthritis in the future.
Is it hereditary?
There's definitely a hereditary component to bunions.
What else can cause it?
Trauma. If you whack your foot really good, or if you do something like that, that can kind of get that balancing off, the alignment off a little bit. But typically we do see it more as a hereditary type thing. So we always tell patients, look at mom's feet, look at grandma's feet, and maybe you can kind of see what's coming down the pike.
So what do you do about it?
Bunions, initially you try conservative care, the type of shoes you wear, orthotics, certain things like that. Try to find those things that don't irritate the bunion. If the bunion progresses and it gets on down the road a while, typically bunions do end up being surgical problems. A lot of the braces or things you see in magazines to try to keep your toes straight just don't usually cut it.
So what would you do in surgery? Do you have to shave it off, or what
you do. You kind of shave off a portion of the hypertrophic or extra bone, and then what you do is you actually realign that joint and you try to get that joint lined up correctly again.
You've got a foot model here. Can you show us basically what you would do in surgery?
I do. So this is actually here is the first metatarsal phalangeal joint, and what you'll notice is with the bunion is the big toe kind of tends to gravitate towards the smaller toes. This retrograde pressure actually pushes this first metatarsal out further. This irritation kind of causes this bone to enlarge, and so the bunion is actually kind of right here. You can also have a bunion on the top, which you'll see some extra bone, or people will call them bone spurs, and you'll see that as well. So typically what we do is we shave off the additional or excess bone in there, make a cut through the bone, and actually realign it and slide it over. This one's actually fairly lined up because this is a normal foot. However, typically with a couple small screws, we can usually keep that joint lined up and then functioning properly rather than skewed.
And then you take, what, a couple weeks recovery, and then you should have some relief, huh?
Typically, it depends. There's different type of procedures depending on the severity of the bunion. Most bunions, you can walk the same day of surgery, which is surprising to a lot of people. Bunion surgery's kind of come a long way.
No kidding, that's great. Well, let me talk about something else that I hear a lot about and that I remember growing up hearing about in my family, hammer toe. I used to laugh and say, what is that? Let's take a look. Explain that one, if you will.
Okay, so that's kind of a quick little graphic of what a hammer toe looks like. So a hammer toe is typically the lesser digits that kind of slowly contract and elevate. Your toes still like to purchase or touch the ground, and so over time, you'll get a curvature of the toes. Initially, those are reducible, and you can kind of straighten the toes, but over time, again, because of the tendon imbalance, the toes will kind of become contracted and stay elevated. They can obviously cause issue in shoe gear if your toes are sticking up. A lot of shoes don't have a high enough toe box. Some of the more fashionable shoes, I guess, don't have a high enough toe box, and you kind of run out of room in the shoe. The most common cause of hammer toes usually is a bunion. Again, it's a biomechanical type thing. If the first ray or the bunion's not pulling its weight, the weight gets transferred to the next one in line, so the second toe is usually the most commonly affected.
All right, let's look at plantar fasciitis. Boy, did I suffer from that, and for a long time. And I hear so many people say to me, I have this horrible heel pain. What is it? I say, I think I know. Explain that one for us, please.
So plantar fasciitis, the plantar fascia is actually kind of a thick, I describe it as a rubber band that kind of runs along the bottom of your foot. It inserts in your heel bone, as you can see on the graphic, and goes up to the ball of the foot, or the metatarsal heads. So what happens is, at night, your foot's typically nice and relaxed, and so you go to step down in the morning and that foot collapses and it puts pressure on that fascia that spans the bottom of the foot. So the weakest point of that fascia is usually where it inserts into the heel bone. So people will complain of waking up in the morning and just having pretty severe heel pain, thinking that they had somehow bruised their heel or couldn't quite figure out what happened. Typically that is inflammation of the fascia. You can get small tears in the fascia itself, or what it does is the fascia kind of spreads out and hooks onto the heel bone. It can actually pull the covering off the bone or the periosteum, and so you can get some pretty good inflammation around the bottom of the heel. Again, most of the pain first steps in the morning when you get out of bed.
Yeah, you feel like, I mean, you want to fall to the floor.
Yeah.
It's that painful.
Yeah, we'll have patients that actually crawl to the bathroom in the morning because it's quite painful. During the day, usually loosens up a little bit because the pump's been primed and the muscle in the foot's warmed up. You go to sit down for 5 or 10 minutes, you get in your car and you go drive and get out 10 minutes later, and the process starts all over again.
Just aches. Yeah. Now, originally, when I had this, they said, okay, ibuprofen, ice it, ibuprofen, ice it. And then it just kept going and going. And then they would say, before you got out of bed in the morning, use a ball and rub it and try to break up that scar tissue. Does that all make sense?
It does. It does. Again, biomechanical problem with plantar fasciitis. So typically it affects people who have tighter muscle groups in the posterior compartments, so your hamstrings, your calf muscles, your Achilles, that type of stuff. So oftentimes we have you kind of warm up a little bit, stretch out. If you can really stretch out your Achilles, stretch that out, that fascia is less tight. It doesn't pull quite as hard, and thus we have less irritation in the heel. So rolling it on a tennis ball, the frozen water bottle trick, you kind of roll it back and forth. Ice is a pretty natural anti-inflammatory. Ibuprofen, which you were suggested to take as well, as an anti-inflammatory. But typically stretching, the type of shoes you wear, 85% of the time we can usually cure this conservatively.
Yeah, one of the things that I purchased didn't really go with, but there are a lot of gizmos and gadgets out there that are supposed to help, and when you're really in pain, you go for anything.
Sure.
And it was one of these things that you put, almost like a brace that you would put on, and it would keep your foot up like this through the night so that in the morning it would have been stretched.
Exactly. It's a night splint. So people will use that. So the people that aren't as good stretching when they should, it's a way of kind of stretching for 8 hours. You have to keep your foot in a certain position, and what it does is it stretches out the back of your leg, and you wake up in the morning and that fascia is already kind of stretched out rather than so tight. And so people do find relief with that sometimes as well. A little difficult to sleep in, though.
Yeah,
so.
that was the problem. Yeah. I was like, I can't do this, forget it. I'll roll on the tennis ball in the morning,
Sure.
So go from there. So what if none of that works? I hear people say, nothing is helping me, and a lot of times it's runners, and they don't want to stop running, but they're in agony. So what are they supposed to do? Sure.
Well, typically, when we get into a little more aggressive treatment for plantar fasciitis, you can want to consider, the icing, the stretching, the anti-inflammatories. Sometimes steroid injections into the heel are pretty good at kind of hitting the reset button and kind of, releasing a lot of that inflammation that's in there. Long term, we need to kind of support that foot. For whatever reason, that foot's starting to collapse a little bit. Excess tension is placed on the fascia. So oftentimes the type of shoes you wear, orthotics, there's over-the-counter orthotics and there's custom orthotics, they really work well to kind of support the arch of your foot, and that's more of a long-term solution for it. If that doesn't work, despite doing all those things, there are about 10 to 15% of people that go on to have surgery for this type of thing.
Yeah.
So.
We have a question here from Sue, and remember our topic is foot pain, foot problems, and this one from Sue is, I've heard bunions can come back after surgery, depending on hip alignment, etc. How can you be sure surgery is successful?
There's always that probability. I mean, anytime you have surgery, you're not going to get a guarantee. However, as long as the alignment is restored, typically bunions don't show up overnight. It's kind of a process, and rarely do they come back if they're treated appropriately surgically. How can you assure that? Well, you want to make sure you get good alignment, that type of thing. Even after surgery, oftentimes you will want to continue to use orthotics or good supportive shoes to kind of do that type of thing. Stretching, again, is always good, because that also can be, tighter muscle groups can also cause bunions as well. So certain things you want to continue to do even after surgery, but it's rare that they do come back.
You've mentioned shoes a couple of times and the correct shoes. Are there shoes that you just shouldn't wear?
Well, it's a tough question. We get that one all the time. That's a tough question.
Flip-flops, no?
Well,
we just had something that said flip-flops were good for you. What are you supposed to do?
Well, typically the more supportive shoe that you wear, the better.
Okay.
So what I recommend to most patients is, and I'm not saying you can do it all the time, but if you can wear a good supportive running style shoe or an athletic style shoe, you're typically best off in something like that. Think of, okay, what would a marathon runner use? Something like that. So, a little bit of research has gone into the design of the shoe, the materials, that type of thing. So typically the more supportive shoe, the better off you're going to be. I'm not saying you can't wear flip-flops or you can't wear high heels. You do what you can. In spurts, you probably don't want to wear flip-flops 7 days a week. In the summer, we see a lot of plantar fasciitis, and typically I think that people think that they can get away with wearing the flip-flops for 7 days a week, and your feet just can't do that sometimes.
What about all these shoes that are out there now that are supposed to be helpful for all this? There are ones that kind of, you rock on them, and then there are other ones that they say, oh, these are really good for exercising the muscles in the backs of your legs, fit shoes and all this kind of thing. Any of those any good?
Well, there's all different types of shoes, and they come out all the time, and there's some that are better than others. Again, you kind of want to go back to a shoe that's nice and supportive. I do have some concern about the ones where you rock a little bit, as far as having certain people, their balance is impaired when they do wear that, and those type of shoes do take a little getting used to. There are certain type of shoes that try to exercise your calf muscles and stuff like that, and you may get some benefit from them, but again, really you kind of want to make sure that you're always in something pretty good and supportive.
Okay, I have turned to clogs. That's all I wear, the Dansko clogs, just because of my feet. I mean, do you know people who get that desperate and then that's all they wear?
Clogs are typically a very good shoe, and surprisingly even cowboy boots.
Really?
You can't pull those off all the time.
But they pinch the front and then you get Morton's neuroma, another problem.
Yeah, you don't want them too tight, but typically something with a little bit of a heel, and that's the reason both cowboy boots and clogs typically do quite well, because they do lift the heel up somewhat, which does take some pressure off the Achilles. So again, the Achilles isn't pulling so tight, the muscles in the foot don't have to work quite as hard, so your feet tend to get less fatigued. The clogs also have a rocker bottom design, so you kind of naturally propels you through your gait pattern when you walk.
Yeah, I really do swear by them. I mean, that's all I can wear, and it's hard in the summer. And that's another whole issue that you run into when you can get problems where you don't air out your feet. You can't always have closed-toed shoes, correct?
Correct. Your feet need to breathe. I mean, your feet do sweat. There's quite a few sweat glands in your feet, and so you do need to, obviously take care of the feet and let them breathe, and keep them nice and clean, and practice normal hygiene and that type of thing there as well.
Yeah, you have to be careful on all that. It's funny you said the sweat glands. 250,000 sweat glands, that's what I read, in the feet?
There's a few in there.
Oh my goodness, no wonder. There's another question that begs in, foot odor. What are people who really have chronic problems with that supposed to do?
Chronic problems with foot odor as well. Typically it's caused by a bacteria or sometimes fungus in the feet, which is common. Fungus grows where it's